Hello and welcome to lesson 6 of this basic Greek course. Today we're going to begin with a review of verbs that we have learned so far. Then we'll be looking at adjectives. Then we will move on to irregular nouns. Then I'll introduce your new vocab to you. And then using that new vocab and some of the concepts that we've learned, we'll do some word operations and translation work together. So let's get going. All right, seeing as I'm not teaching you any new verb endings today, I thought that it would be good to do some revision. So let's take a look at the present active indicative verb endings with luo. Remember, we're looking at the present tense, so that's related to the imperfective verbal aspect. So when we translate verbs in the present tense, we translate them with a linear or progressive kind of action. The active voice tells us that the subject is doing the action, and the indicative mood is the mood of assertion, where a real statement is made, and it's the only mood where time is significant. So let's take a look at the various forms. The singular first person, luo, second person, luace, third person, lua. First person plural, luamen, second person, luete, and third person, luusin, with the movable nu. So how do we translate each one of these? Remember, the first person singular is I am loosing. Second person singular, you are loosing. Third person singular, he, she, it is loosing. First person plural, we are loosing. Second person plural, you are loosing. And then third person plural, they are loosing. Let's now revise the present middle passive indicative verb endings with luo. So here we want to focus on the middle and passive voices. The middle voice is where the subject acts in its own interest or for itself. And the passive voice is where the subject receives the action of the verb. However, the middle passive forms are the same, and so they can only be distinguished from the context. So let's go through each one of these together. The singulars first person, we have luamai, second person, lua, third person, luetai. The plural forms, first person, luametha, second person, luesthe, and third person, luantai. So when we translate these in the middle voice, we would translate the first person singular as I am loosing for myself, and the passive voice, I am being loosed. The second person singular, you are loosing for yourself, and in the passive voice, you are being loosed. The third person singular, middle voice, he, she, or it is loosing for itself. And then the passive voice, he, she, it is being loosed. The first person plural, we are loosing for ourselves, or the passive voice, we are being loosed. The second person plural, you are loosing for yourself, and the passive voice, you are being loosed. And then the third person plural, they are loosing for themselves, and the passive voice, they are being loosed. All right, the first new concept that I want to introduce to you in this lesson is the adjective. So let's remind ourselves of what an adjective is. Well, it comes from the Latin word meaning to add something. So if we had to give a definition for an adjective, or in other words, its function, it says there, the main function of the adjective is that of qualifying the noun to which it is related by distinguishing it from other nouns or by further describing it. All right, and sometimes we use the word modify as a synonym for describing. Now, life would be really boring if there were no adjectives. So here's a table just helping us to see the variation within adjectives. So the top line are words that most people use when they describe various things. If we had to, for example, say that something is big, we could actually use many other types of adjectives to describe that object that is big. We could say that it is sizable, or gigantic, or huge, or enormous, or immense, or massive, or grand. Right, so we don't need to limit ourselves to just using the word big. There's different types of adjectives that we can use to describe an object. And that goes for small. We could instead use the adjectives tiny, minuscule, petite, slight, puny, trivial, or minor. How about this one? If something is bad, we could say that it is lousy, or wicked, unpleasant, or horrible, or terrible, or evil, or awful. If we were describing something that is good, we could say that it is great, or fantastic, or admirable, or pleasant, or wholesome, or noble, or wonderful. And finally, a word that the youth often use, cool, to describe something. Perhaps it would be better to say that it's interesting, or captivating, or superb, or excellent, or awesome, or stupendous, or stylish. All right, so I hope that you can see that descriptors or adjectives really bring color to life and help us to describe objects that we are speaking about. Now that we have reminded ourselves of the English adjective and looked at some examples, let's now turn our attention to the Greek adjective. So the first point that I want to make is that each Greek noun has only one gender. All right, so we've learned that already, but in contrast to the Greek noun, Greek adjectives have all three genders. All right, what is the reason for this? It is because it must be able to describe a noun of any gender. All right, so as opposed to a Greek noun that will only ever have one gender, a Greek adjective can incorporate all three genders to describe a noun. It carries on here. It says, furthermore, an adjective agrees with the noun it modifies in gender, case, and number. All right, so an adjective will always agree in those three ways. And then finally, for today, we're only focusing on positive adjectives. What is a positive adjective? It focuses on the properties of a noun in terms of kind rather than degree. So we're not looking at comparative adjectives today. We're only focusing on positive adjectives which speak of kind rather than degree. So let us now take a look at the forms of the Greek adjective. So the example that we are going to use is agathos for the masculine, the feminine is agathei, and the neuter is agathon. And this adjective, as we're going to learn in our vocab section, means good. All right, so remember, when we decline an adjective, we need to decline it for all three of the genders, the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. What will also encourage you towards memorizing the paradigms is that the endings, by and large, follow the first and second declension nouns that we have learned previously. So let's have a look at the masculine, singular, and plural endings first. Beginning with the singular, the nominative is agathos, the genitive is agathou, dative agatho, accusative agathon. The plural, nominative agathoi, genitive agathon, dative agathois, and the accusative agathous. Alright, so that shouldn't cause you too many problems at this stage. If you know your second declension masculine endings, then this is following the same endings. Then look at the feminine, and because agathe, which means good, ends in an eta, it's going to follow the eta pattern of the first declension. Alright, so the nominative is agathe, the genitive is agatheis, the dative agathe, and the accusative agathein. Right, so there you see the eta in the adjective. And the plural forms, the nominative is agathai, genitive agathon, dative agatheis, and accusative agathas. And then the neuter, singular, and plural forms, the nominative is agathon, the genitive is agathou, dative agatho, accusative agathon. And then the plural, we have agatha, genitive agathon, dative agathois, and accusative agatha. Alright, you can also see there that we are not declining the article for each adjective, because the adjective will modify a noun that generally has an article that accompanies it. Now, it says there, as with feminine nouns, there is another pattern of feminine singular adjective endings. So remember, if a vowel, normally a iota or an epsilon or a rho, come before the alpha, it follows the alpha pattern in all its feminine singular forms. So for example, the feminine singular of mikros, which is an adjective meaning small or little, is mikra. Right, you see there the rho coming before the alpha. So it follows the alpha pattern in the nominative. So let's practice declining the feminine singular mikra together. Right, so let's decline the feminine of mikra. Alright, mikra means small or little. Right, so this is an adjective. So let's decline it together. The nominative is mikra. So because we have the rho before the alpha, this is going to follow the alpha pattern. So the genitive is mikras, the dative is mikra, and the accusative is mikran. Right, so remember we only see variation in the singular forms. The plural forms are going to be consistent with all the first declension patterns. Alright, so the nominative is mikrai, genitive mikron, dative mikrais, and accusative mikras. Alright, so if you are a little confused about the declining of mikra and are not too sure about this alpha pattern, please re-watch the previous lesson, because that will fill you in as to the various patterns of the first declension. Now that you are familiar with the various forms of the Greek adjective, I want to now introduce you to the three uses of the Greek adjective. And as you can see before you here, we have three uses. We have the predicate use, the attributive use, and the substantive use. So what is the characteristic of these uses? Well, firstly, the predicate use is where an adjective renames a subject. Right, so there's the key word, renames a subject, and it often uses a linking verb to do so. The attributive use is where the adjective modifies or describes a noun. So those are two key words there, modifies or describes a noun. And then finally, the substantive use is an adjective which functions as a noun. All right, so that's why it's called the substantive use. Now, before we look at the uses of the Greek adjective in more detail, I'd like to tell you about two helpful rules. And these two rules will help you to distinguish the attributive from the predicate use of the adjective. So look at these two rules with me. The first rule is when the article comes before the noun and not the adjective is always used as a predicate to rename a noun. All right, so that's the predicate use. And then rule number two, when the article comes before the adjective, it is always used as an adjective to modify or describe a noun. All right, so that's the attributive use. All right, so what you need to be aware of is the position of the article. So rule one says that the article, when it comes before the noun, will then tell you that the adjective is being used as a predicate. And then the rule number two, if the article comes before the adjective, then it's going to be used attributively as an adjective to modify or describe a noun. So let's begin first with the predicate use of the adjective. So let me explain this information for you in the table. The first line says there that this is the articular, and articular means with the article. So these are the with article adjectival constructions. And these constructions are made up of position 1 and position 2. So below that, these positions are laid out for us. So the first position is where we have the adjective, followed by the article, followed by the noun. In the second position, we have the article, followed by the noun, followed by the adjective. Now, let's apply our rules that we've learned previously. Rule 1, if you remember, says when the article comes before the noun and not the adjective is always used as a predicate. So let's see if rule 1 does apply to these positions. All right, so we see in the first position that the article comes before the noun. So yes, rule 1 does apply. And then the second position, we have the article, and it also comes before the noun. So because of the position of the article, rule 1 applies, and therefore the adjective is going to function as a predicate. So look at the Greek texture with me. For the first position, we have agathos. If you remember, that means good. The article ha, which we can translate as the, and then anthropos, which is man. So how would we make sense of that information in the Greek using rule 1? Well, firstly, because we know that the adjective is functioning as a predicate, we need to supply a linking verb. So that's why we are using is in both these examples. So we translate this as the man is good, where good is renaming or telling us more about the subject, which is the man. And then this is very similar in the second position, where we've got ha, anthropos, agathos. And we translate that as well as the man is good. All right, where good, the adjective, is renaming or telling us more about the man. All right, so I know it's a lot of information to take in at the moment, but just remember, look at the position of the article. And here, rule 1 applies, and therefore we translate it as a predicate. Next, let's take a look at the attributive use of the adjective. And once again, in our table, this is the articular, which means with the article adjectival constructions. And those constructions have two positions, the first position and the second position. So let's have a look at the order of the information of these positions. First position, we have the article, then the adjective, then the noun. And the second position, we have the article, the noun, article again, then the adjective. All right, so let's apply the rules that we've learned previously, and this time we're looking at rule number 2. And rule number 2 states, when the article comes before the adjective, it is always used as an adjective to describe or modify the noun. So have a look again at the first position. Let's find the article. And where's the article placed? It's placed before the adjective. And then the second position, we have two articles, but one of those articles is placed before the adjective. Right, so in both of these positions, rule 2 does apply because the article comes before the adjective. And therefore the adjective is going to be used attributively to describe or modify the noun. So look at the Greek text. For the first position, we have ha, which can be translated as the, agathos, which is good, anthropos, which is man. Right, so the translation would be the good man, where good describes man. And then in the second position, the Greek text says ha, anthropos, ha, agathos. And we would translate that also as the good man, where good once again is modifying or describing, telling us what kind of man. It's the good man. Now, just before you get too comfortable and think that this is too simple, I need to inform you that there are some exceptions. And they are exceptions because rules 1 and 2 do not apply in these scenarios. And one of the main reasons for this is because we are now looking at the anarthrous adjectival constructions. And anarthrous means that there is no article. All right, so you can see that the predicate use and the attributive uses are very similar. So they both have first position, second position, and they are exactly the same. So have a look there at the predicate use and then look at the attributive use. All right, so they are identical. So the only way you are going to distinguish between the anarthrous adjectival constructions, all right, for the predicate use and the attributive use is by looking at the context in which they are found, and then decide based on the context how you think the adjective is best being used. Is it best used as a predicate or as an adjective? All right, so let's just quickly go through one or two of these examples together. So looking at the predicate use, the first position is the adjective noun, which is agathos, anthropos. So if you decide from the context that agathos has been used as a predicate adjective, then you would translate this as a man is good. You would supply the indefinite article a because there's no definite article in the Greek. And then the second position, the noun adjective, which is anthropos agathos. Once again, if you decide that agathos is being used as a predicate adjective, you would translate this as a man is good. And then in both examples, you would supply the linking verb is. However, with the attributive use, identical first and second positions as the previous examples. So the first position, you have adjective noun, which is agathos, anthropos. But let's say you decide that within the context that agathos is better used attributively, then you would translate this as a good man. And the second position, you have the noun adjective, which is anthropos, agathos. And once again, you decide that it's being used as an adjective, you would supply the English as a good man. Right, so it's a lot harder when there is no article and where you can apply the rules. And so you would have to base your decision-making process on the context, which will best determine how you translate these constructions. I think it's always good to take the theory that we're learning and to apply it to the real thing, which in this case is the Bible. So let's look at the predicate uses and some examples specifically from the Greek New Testament. So example 1 comes from 1 Corinthians 1 verse 9, and this is the articular position, meaning with the article. And because there is an article before the noun, that we can apply rule 1. So look at the Greek with me. It says pistos ha theos. All right, so because pistos, the adjective, faithful, is used as a predicate adjective, we can supply the linking verb and translate this as God is faithful, where faithful renames the subject God. And then example 2 comes from Romans 4 verse 8, and this is an example of the anarthrous position without the article. So because there's no article, you would have to establish from the context that the adjective is being used as a predicate adjective. So I'm not going to read the whole Greek text, only that which applies to our concepts here. So it says here, makarios aneo. All right, so makarios is the adjective which means blessed, and aneo is man. So quite literally, we could translate this as a man is blessed, but most translations will emphasize what the Greek emphasizes, which is makarios being placed in the front of the sentence, and translate the adjective first as blessed is the man. All right, so there, contextually, that is the best use of the adjective. All right, and then just a final note here. It says that Greek frequently expresses the predicate without a linking verb. All right, so in both these examples, there is no linking verb, so we have to supply it in the English to mark the predicate, and we've used the English linking verb is. Let us now look at some attributive use examples from the Greek New Testament. And to begin with, I've said here in Greek, an attributive adjective always agrees with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case. All right, so besides looking at the position of the article, you can also look out for this clue. If there is agreement in gender, number, and case, then the adjective will be modifying the noun as an adjective. All right, so the first example comes from 1 John 5 verse 20, and this is an example of the articular position where the article comes before the adjective. Therefore, rule 2 will apply in this scenario. So look at the Greek text with me. We have ha, alethanos, theos. All right, so alethanos is the adjective, and we have the article that comes before it. So therefore, rule 2 applies, and we translate this then as the true God, where true is telling us about the kind of God that we serve. And then example 2 comes from 2 John verse 1, and this is the example of the anarthrous position, right, without the article. And once again, you would have to determine the use of the adjective from the context. But also, in this case, you will see that there is agreement between the adjective and the noun in gender, number, and case. So the Greek text says there, eklete kuria. All right, so the adjective, which is translated there as elect, agrees with the noun kuria, which is lady, in gender, number, and case. All right, so we would translate this as to the elect lady and to her children. All right, so I hope that those examples from the Greek New Testament just help to solidify some of the theory that we've been speaking about, but we will do some more practice examples together soon. Now that we've looked at the predicate and the attributive uses of the adjective, it's now time to look at the third use, which is the substantive use. So let's look at three characteristics of this use together. Number one, a substantive adjective does not modify a noun, but functions as a noun itself. Number two, it almost always has the article. So that is a big key when you see the article in front of it, that this is functioning substantively. And then number three, the reader must insert the appropriate noun based upon the adjective's gender and number. So let's take a look at some examples together. The first example here is ha agathos. All right, so this is the masculine use because there is a masculine article that comes in front of the adjective. And because it's masculine, we can supply the English word man, which is male or masculine, and translate this as the good man. All right, so normally you would think that you would translate this simply as the good, but because it's functioning substantively as a noun, we need to add the gender and number, which is in this case is man. Next we have hey agathe, and here we have a feminine article telling us that this adjective is feminine, and that is why we can supply the noun woman and translate this as the good woman. And then finally we have ta agatha, and we know that ta is a neuter article, telling us therefore that the adjective is neuter. So this is neither masculine nor feminine, and therefore we can supply the English word things and translate this as the good things. All right, so at first this might seem a little strange to you that we are improvising and adding in words that are not in the Greek, but you need to understand that this is functioning substantively, and this is actually quite common when you do translation work. So I'd like to take a look at three more examples from the Greek New Testament just to help you with the uses of the adjective. So our first example comes from James 1 verse 13. So James says here, Hei gar chrysis anelios. Alright, so there is our adjective anelios, which means without mercy, and the noun is chrysis. Now we have here gar in front of chrysis, which is a post-positive, but at the very beginning we have an article, and so the article is in front of the noun. So based on what we've learned, we would apply rule 1, because rule 1 tells us that if the article comes before the noun, then the adjective, which in this case is anelios, will function as the predicate adjective by renaming the subject. So therefore we would translate this as, for the judgment is without mercy. All right, where the adjective without mercy is renaming the subject, which is judgment. Our second example comes from 1 Timothy 6 verse 12, where Paul says to Timothy, aganitsu ton kalon agona tes pestuos. All right, so our adjective here is ton kalon, which means, kalon means good as well. And the noun here is agona, which is fight. And because the article comes before the adjective, here we would apply rule 2. And rule 2 tells us that the adjective will be functioning attributively by describing or modifying the noun. So that's why we would translate this as fight the good fight of the faith. And then in our final example, which also comes from James, is James 1 verse 10. James begins here by saying, ha de prusios. So here, prusios is the adjective, which means rich. All right, and here you can see we have the article in front of it. And there's no noun in the vicinity. So this should give us a clue that it is functioning substantively as a noun. And therefore, in the English, we need to supply a noun according to the gender and number. So this is a masculine noun, so we could translate this as the rich man, or contextually we could use the word brother. Right, so I hope that those 3 examples from the Greek New Testament are helpful to you and just help to reinforce the knowledge of the uses of the Greek adjective. All right, let's move on to the nouns section of this lesson. And I want to begin by asking you a question. And the question is this: what gender do you think is the noun hodos, which means way or road? So here is a table declining hodos. So look at the nominative singulars. So we have hodos, genitive hodu, dative hodo, accusative hodon. The plural, nominative hodoi, genitive hodon, dative hodois, and accusative hodus. All right, so based on what you've learned so far, would you say that this is a masculine, a feminine, or a neuter noun? If you said masculine, based on this information in the table, you would be correct, because the endings are the same for second declension nouns, all right, which are generally masculine and can even be neuter as well. All right. However, I'm terribly sorry to tell you that this noun is actually feminine. All right, so this is a huge exception in Greek. So let's speak about this now in more detail. So although most second declension nouns are masculine or neuter, a few are feminine. All right, so for example, hodos. So such nouns take the normal second declension endings, but they take a feminine article. And that is why we call this the feminine second declension nouns. All right, feminine because although they look like masculine or neuter nouns, they have feminine genders. All right, so the key to not being confused by this is to look at the article that accompanies the noun, because the article never lies. And hodos will always take a feminine article. So in the nominative, it's he, genitive tes, dative te, accusative tain. The plurals are hi, tone, tes, and tes. Right, so even though the endings of hodos are all second declension, all right, because of the feminine article, this noun has a feminine gender. And then the final thing that I want to add here is, says here, because they are feminine, they are modified or described by feminine adjectives. All right, so if you had he hodos, which is the way, and the Greek author wanted to talk about the good way, he would use a feminine adjective to do so. All right. So I know that this sounds very confusing, and this goes contrary to what we've learned so far, but you need to make room in your mind for exceptions, because Greek has a few of them, and when you first come across them, they can really surprise you and even shock you. So you've been shocked into reality now, but remember that hodos, even though it looks like a second declension noun, has a feminine gender. So here's a second question that I want to ask you. What gender is the noun prophetes? All right, so some of you might be catching on to where I'm going with this, but if we had to decline prophetes, we see the singular nominative is prophetes, the genitive is prophetu. All right, so I'm going to put a star there. The dative is prophete, the accusative is prophetain, the plural forms, the nominative is propheti, genitive propheton, dative prophetes, and the accusative prophetus. All right, so the question is, what gender is prophetes? Is it a masculine, feminine, or neuter? All right, so based on the majority of the endings, with the exception of the genitive singular, this you would expect to be a feminine gender. All right, but once again, this is a huge exception, and you shouldn't be as surprised as you were the first time. This is actually a noun that has a masculine gender. So let's talk about why. So similarly to the feminine second declension nouns, some first declension nouns are masculine nouns. Why masculine? Because the articles that accompany these nouns are masculine. So look in the table. Our singular forms are all masculine. We have ha, tu, to, and ton, and the plural forms hoi, ton, tois, and tus. So all the articles are masculine, but the endings of the nouns, all of them except the genitive singular and the genitive plural, follow the first declension endings. All right, so the nominative singular we see here is prophetes. All right, so because we have the eta there, it's going to follow the eta pattern. So our dative has prophete in it and prophetain. All right, so you see the eta is quite prominent there in the singular forms. The plural forms, however, are quite consistent with the first declension nouns. We have propheti, propheton, prophetes, and prophetus. And there's another word that follows the eta pattern, and that is mathetes, which means disciple. And its lexical form would be mathetes with the masculine article. All right, and that will give you a clue to show you that it is a masculine first declension noun. Let's take a look at one more example of a masculine first declension noun. But this example, unlike prophetes, follows the alpha pattern. So our example is neanios, which means young man. And it is also called masculine. It has a masculine gender because all the articles that accompany it are masculine. So let's just go through the forms together. The nominative singular is ha neanias. All right, so we see the alpha pattern beginning there. The genitive is tu neaniu. Dative to neania. All right, the alpha pattern there. Accusative is ton neanion. All right, so we see the alpha pattern quite strongly there. The plural forms is hoi neaniai, ton neanion, tois neanias, and tus neanias. All right, let's just make one or two observations here. The first one is regarding the nominative singular, which is neanias. Now, if you remember, this is normally the the feminine singular genitive form, the alpha sigma. So this now becomes the nominative singular form. The second observation is that the genitive singular follows the article for the second declensions. All right, so there we have a masculine ending, which is an exception in this paradigm. And then the genitive plural is also following the second declensions, but the genitive plural is the same for all the genders, and that you should know by now. All right, so I think those are all the characteristics. I realize that these nouns, I like to think of these as backward nouns or upside down nouns. They're a little tricky at first, but remember to learn the article and to pay attention to the article. If you can pass the article, then it'll really help you with identifying the gender of these nouns. All right, it's time for our vocab for lesson 6. So let's begin with the first word. We have agathos, agathei, agathon. So this is how you will find the lexical form for adjectives. So note that they do not appear with an article. Instead, they appear with the endings that the adjective will use to modify each gender. All right, so the first one is agathos, which is the masculine. Then we have agathei, which is the feminine gender, and then agathon, which is the neuter gender. And that, as we've already seen, means good. Then we have hagios, rough breathing mark, hagia, and hagion, which means holy. Next we have kalos, kale, kalon, which means good or beautiful. Next we have mikros, and then remember the nominative singular is mikra, and then we have mikron, which means small or little. Next we have pistos, pistei, piston, which means faithful. Then we have poneiros, poneira, and poneiron, which means evil. All right, then we have a verb, ago, which means I lead. Then we have apostello, apostello means I send. All right, then we have a noun, apostolos ha, all right, with a masculine article means apostle. Then we have another noun, balo, balo means I cast or I throw. All right, then we have hodos hey, hodos hey. All right, so that is our feminine second declension noun, means way or road. Then we have prophetes ha, which is our masculine first declension noun, which means prophets, and mathetes ha, which is also a masculine first declension noun, which means disciple, and neanios ha, which means young man. And then finally we have a preposition pro, which means before, and it takes its object in the genitive case. Let us finish this lesson again with translating a Greek verse together. All right, so the Greek reads, ha, mathetes, aposteletai, pros, ta, hieron, hupa, tu, pistu, prophetu. So let's have a look at the details of the passing sheet. So we have ha, which is an article, and it's nominative, masculine, singular. Then we have mathetes, so this is an example of an irregular noun. And we need to look at the article, all right, to pass this noun. So it's also nominative, masculine, singular. Then we have aposteletai, which is a verb, present tense. It can be middle or passive, so we'll have to decide which is the best fit based on the context. Indicative, third person singular from apostello, which means I send. Then we have pros, which is a preposition, takes its object in the accusative case. That is why ta and hieron are both in the accusative case. All right, one's an article, the one's an object of the preposition, and they're both neuter, singular. Then we have hupa, which is a preposition, takes its object in the genitive case. That is why tu, pistu, and prophetu are all in the genitive case. So tu is the article. It's a masculine singular. All right. Then we've got pistu, which is an adjective. And as you can see, it agrees with the noun in gender, number, and case. So it's also genitive, masculine, singular, as well as prophetu, which is genitive, masculine, singular. And this prophetu is also an example of an irregular noun. So let's parse this together. So we have here ha, mathetes, which is the disciple. Aposteletai. If it was in the middle voice, we would say the disciple is sending himself, which is possible. But I prefer the passive voice, so we translate this as the disciple is being sent. Pros ta, all right, to ta hieron, the temple. Hupa in the genitive is translated as by. By who? Tu pistu prophetu. So here we have the adjective, all right, and the article comes before the adjective. So this is telling us that the adjective is functioning attributively and modifying or describing prophetu, the noun. So we would translate this as by the faithful prophet. Right, so the disciple is being sent to the temple by the faithful prophet.